know your chestnuts, and that's quite important. I see a lot of videos where people talk about chestnuts and they expect everybody to automatically assume they're talking about the edible sweet chestnut, but there are also some poisonous chestnuts, the horse chestnut and the buckeye chestnut. We've got examples of all three in these woods hereabout, but it's getting dark now and the examples I know of are quite a long way from here, but at least the good examples. But I'm just going to find some basic examples and we'll have a look at the difference, because the sweet chestnut is edible, but the horse chestnut and the related buckeye chestnut straight off the bat are not edible without considerable processing, although the horse chestnut was used as a famine food, but it is poisonous, so you do have to process it, and even then it still might be slightly poisonous. So I know there's a chestnut up this wood line which we're proceeding along. So here's a sweet chestnut tree. And there you can see the distinctive leaves. Each one is a distinctive leaf. Bit like a massive version of a beech leaf, an elongated version, and it is related to the beech. But this far north in the UK, unless it's an exceptional summer, they never really get to any size. They never really have a long enough season to grow the nut inside of the case. This is the other chestnut, the horse chestnut, and the chestnuts off this are poisonous, and they will have just about all fallen off now because autumn is well and truly upon us. There's the empty pods, slightly spiky. Quite often they have bigger spikes than this, but this one is not particularly spiky. We've just had a bit of a bang because we're close to bonfire night where the kids can let off fireworks. I think the kids or somebody must have picked up all the horse chestnuts, or as we used to call them, conkers. There's one, a small example. There are short, stout spines on the casings, but the spines are not really hard enough to stick into you. They're not as prickly as the sweet chestnut spines. I'm struggling to find the actual conkers besides that one there. Somebody must have been harvesting them. Okay, well, we've just about lost the light here, but I've got some better specimens. Well, that one's not better. That one's not better. Alright, cancel that. But I was going to say better specimens of the conkers, but both of them are damaged. But we can look at the leaf. here, and this is the leaf, all the fronds of the leaf. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fronds of the leaf, with the one stalk there going on to the branch. These are in a sorry state because it is now full-blown autumn. But look at that, look at that. There is the bud. Look at that. There is the bud for next year. Already very sticky to protect it from insect damage. And the bees collect that sort of stickiness and chew it up a bit, and we call it propolis. But we're not going to get much here because I've got the camera, the phone camera, on its maximum brightness settings, and we are rapidly losing the light. Right, but as you can see, perhaps down there, if I adjust the settings to get the sky, look at that pink sky. Pink sky. You can have either the sky or the ground, but you can't have both. I'll explain this camera. This is a phone, so it's a smartphone, but I don't use it as a phone. But the only reason I got this phone was because of its manual camera settings in both stills and video. So I've got the frame rate on a 60th of a second, which will be a bit shaky for moving around, because as I say, we're now just about lost the light. So here we are back at base camp, and I've collected the horse chestnut here, poisonous, and the sweet chestnut here, not poisonous, edible. And there are some similarities but some very distinct differences between the two. First of all, the case of the sweet chestnut is much more spiky and prickly and painful than the horse chestnut. And it's relative, the horse chestnut's relative, the buckeye, because the buckeye has quite a smooth outer casing or husk or pod or whatever you want to call it, and you can see why it's called the buckeye, because it looks like the eye of a buck. So the only real connection between the two, I think they do have some distant relationship as the genus or species of tree go, but the only real connection is the word chestnut. Now the poison in the horse chestnut, its common name is esculin, but I'll put up the chemical name along the bottom because I'll just make a fool of myself trying to pronounce it. But essentially what it does is it thins your blood and damages your internal organs. However, I've done some research, and in World War II in the Netherlands, people were processing these as a famine food. So I don't know what that process was, whether the toxin is water soluble or whether you can destroy it by heating. I don't know, but it was used as a famine food in the Second World War in the Netherlands, and I'll put a link to the research I found on that, but it's not great. It just covers the sort of things that they were eating as famine food in the Second World War, and it's not very specific on how the chestnut was made edible. So everything has some positive uses though, and one of its main positive uses is because of the saponins, if that's the right term. in the leaves, the juices and the fruit, it can be used as soap. In fact, I've done it before myself. I've taken the leaves, wet my hands, crushed the leaves up in my hands, and you get a foam, a soap, and you can use it as a cleaning agent. And you can take the conkers or the chestnuts and you can smash these up and soak them in water, and soak them for a day or two, and you can use that liquid as a soap to wash your clothes with. So as I say, everything has its uses. So there are quite a few varieties of the horse chestnut, or the Asculus, genus Asculus, and that includes the horse chestnut and the buckeye and variations of them. Right, so this is the sweet chestnut then, with its very prickly husk, quite painfully prickly. And this is, the genus is the Castanea, something like that. I'll put it at the bottom. And this is only very, very, very distantly related to the horse chestnut, but it's much more closely related to the beech. And it hasn't been a bad year for beech nuts in this area this year, and they don't look that dissimilar. If you scaled the beech nut up and made its hairs a bit pricklier, they would look quite similar. And in fact, this year we are getting a bit of nut in the beech nut. In fact, you can see there, we're getting some fair sized and edible beech nuts this year. So if you didn't know the difference between the two, you could get them confused, because they do look fairly similar. They have a light patch on them and a darker patch, and the horse chestnuts can have a flat side on them. Usually this doesn't have a flat side on it, but usually the sweet chestnut does have one flat side on it, but not always. But once you've seen the two and have been told which is which, it's quite easy to tell the difference. The sweet chestnut, it, on the opposite to the light side, it comes up to a little point, and it's a little hairy point, and a lot of the hairs will be knocked off these sweet chestnuts, but you can see that hairy point there. So once you know the difference, you're not going to get them mixed up. Right, so because we very rarely get a good harvest of sweet chestnuts in this area, although I do know where there are plenty of large sweet chestnut trees, so occasionally when we do get a good harvest, about every 5 or 7 years, then I can pick plenty of these up of about this size. But that's not the case this year. If I lived further down south, they'll probably have a very good harvest this year down south, but it's not economical for me to go all the way down the south of England, so I've just gone to the supermarket and bought these. And these chestnuts in fact came from Italy. There's a lot of actual farms. Chestnuts are farmed for the sweet chestnuts, and farmed for the wood of the chestnut tree as well, because like the oak, which the chestnut is also related to, the chestnut wood has a lot of tannin in it, so it resists pests and rot very well, so it's very good building material. So that covers the differences of the two then. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go outside when it stops raining. We're going to go outside If it doesn't stop raining, I'll have to do it on the stove, but I'd rather do it outside, and we're gonna cook a few, or roast a few, sweet chestnut. We might just roast 1 or 2 horse chestnut as well, just to see what happens. But bear in mind, they are poisonous, so we won't be eating these ones. We will be eating these ones. Right. Now sometimes when you're losing the light, everything's wet and you're in a bit of a rush, you just want to get a fire started. So in my little fire kit, what I have is a little container of paraffin. So we'll spray that on the let's not stint ourselves. We'll spray that on the cattails I've put in there. And then, is that one open? No, that one's not opened. That one's been opened. We'll use one of these military storm matches to light the cattail. Cattails are blooming dangerous. The trick is not to smother the flame. Let the flame rise. Let all the gases rise, because it's the gases that are doing the work. Not the pieces of wood, but the gases that are coming from the wood. It's them that are burning. You need them gases to mix with oxygen. Right, so let's get the chestnuts. Right, so when we get a few coals, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put them in this baking pan. It's very important first to cut the chestnuts. You can do one of, well, you can do it any way you want, but just try not to cut your fingers. So what I'm going to do, you can put them down on the flat. If the chestnut has got a flat, put it down on the flat, bang on the flat, and you can score you can put an X in the shell. Put an X in the shell, or you can cut all the way around the outside of the shell. And you're doing this for 2 reasons. One, to stop them exploding, and 2, to make it easy to take the skin off. I've actually soaked these because at the end of the day I'm trying to steam cook them. As long as you cut through the shell, just be careful. This is a good opportunity to cut your fingers and use your first aid kit, so just be careful. Obviously going to need a stake here. Does two things, this. One, it gives the smoke somewhere to rise up, and another, it reflects a lot of heat. I'm using my Manticore non-locking legal carry knife for this exercise. Right, I need to leave the coals, put a bit more wood on there, let it burn down. I don't want to leave it too long because it's starting to get dark now. So I'll put a bit more on. I've got a little job to do, chop a bush down in the front garden, and then I'll get back to you. Two very handy things when you're mucking about with fires are gloves. These have got leather pads on them, and an axe. Right, this fire is not as I would like it for baking on, but we don't always have the advantage of time, so I'm just going to go ahead and bake these at 200 degrees C for 15 to 20 minutes. Or until the outer casings become partially carbonised. It's getting a bit ferocious because I've just put a bit of fat wood in there. Where I've cut them, you can see them opening up, splitting open as the insides, either the insides get fatter or the outsides get smaller. That one right in the centre of the frame, now right in the centre of the frame, that's actually a conker, and that's opening up, but it's opening up just like the chestnuts are opening up. Steam coming off. You're obviously going to need gloves as well to handle them because they're going to be hot when they come out of there. Ordinarily I would cook on coals because that would give you a much more controlled heat, whereas this way you got flame jumping all over the place. You haven't got so much control of the heat, but life's not perfect. Oh, there we go. So that's what happens. that's what happens. That's what happens when you don't put a hole in them. You get a little explosion and you get You get stuff jumping about all over the place, and in fact it's knocked one of the chestnuts out as well. And that was the conker we put in, by the way. That was one of the conkers that I put in without splitting. Right, let's take one of the chestnuts out and see where we're at. I don't know whether you're going to see this. Oh, it's a bit hot. It's a bit blooming hot. So that's one of the chestnuts which I've just taken out. You can see the splits opened up. So I'm just going to de-shell it. De-shelling them is a fairly easy process, but the shell is nice and crisp and comes off easily. They have got a brown skin under that shell, and you want to get that brown skin off because that brown skin will have a lot of tannin in it, and it's steaming under there, so I think they all want to come off now. You could put a bit of butter or something on it, a bit of seasoned butter maybe, but that's it. You can see it's a little bit scorched. Quite firm. I'm going to take them all off now. Okay, well, we've lost the light to such an extent I've had to go to manual focus. So in a nutshell then, that's knowing your chestnuts, how to identify them and how not to cook them, although they are quite edible. And if you're around the campfire of an evening with a couple of glasses of wine, you're not going to complain about a few little burnt bits. You can just, you know, if you don't want to risk burning them as I am burning them, or as I have burned them, you can just boil them, and that's probably the safest way of doing it, is just to put them in boiling water. I would still split them and just put them in boiling water, because I've incinerated that one. Right, so that concludes this episode, and I'll catch you in a week or so.